Congressman Anthony Brindisi. When does Lent begin is the question.
That's really why we have you on this morning.
We just didn't know the answer. Thought we'd go to you on that. Any idea?
What was the question again? I missed it.
When does Lent begin? When is Fat Tuesday? I don't know.
Fat Tuesday.
It's coming soon, right?
It's coming soon. Is it next week?
Could
next
be.
Tuesday?
Do you know what it is?
I don't.
Okay.
He's got more important things to worry about.
It's funny how Catco, Griffo, they rhyme. They're similar names, but you two have a camaraderie that seems to be an example of what we should see in Congress, both sides working together.
Yeah, well, I formed a good friendship with Congressman Catco from Syracuse. We met right after I got elected, started to talk about ways we could work together. We're both a part of this Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan group that tries to find ways that we can work together on some of the big issues that are stopping us in Washington. And we decided last night that we would sit together at the State of the Union instead of doing the old Democrat on one side, Republican on the other side. We would sit together during the State of the Union, listen, and that's kind of how we want to work together is, cross lines.
I have to ask this question just because I'm a gigantic jerk. But did Claudia make her way to you last night?
Was that Catco's seat she was sitting in?
To say hello?
Surprisingly, she did not make her way over to see me last night. I have to say she was busy talking to a lot of her former colleagues.
Well, that's very nice. Very, very nice. What was your take on the president's speech? Ann Coulter thinks it's garbage.
Garbage. Well, I guess we're off to a good start then. Look, I think it was overall it was a good speech. Like with any State of the Union, there's things in there you're going to agree with, there's things you're going to disagree with. I appreciated the president's tone. I think on issues of bipartisanship and unity, he struck the right tone. And I know that words are one thing, but we got to follow it up with some action. And I'm ready to work on a lot of the things he talked about. He brought up infrastructure. That's an area that I would love to work on, and hopefully we can get something done on infrastructure this year because we could certainly use the federal dollars in upstate New York to fix some of our roads and bridges and places like Ilion where we have old water systems and water main breaks all the time. We need to have some of that investment from the federal government. So I want to work with the president on that. Lowering drug costs. I hear that every single town hall I'm at, the cost of prescription drugs, it's really killing consumers, and we need to do something to lower drug costs, go after those middlemen. The president's talked about that. I think we can work together. I was happy to hear him talk about health care and trying to lower health care costs and actually protect people with pre-existing conditions so insurance companies can't discriminate against folks with pre-existing conditions. That's something we need to do right away. So I thought overall it was a good speech. I always enjoy when the president, whoever the giving the speech is, but when they highlight some of the true heroes in our country, whether it was last night with the World War II veterans or the young girl with cancer or some of the other folks that he highlighted last night, it really gives an opportunity for some bipartisan show of support, and that's always a good thing to help bring us all together.
There was a happy birthday for a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I got to say, being on the floor and singing happy birthday to a Holocaust survivor was pretty special, and I got to imagine he enjoyed that. It's not usual. You got both chambers of Congress singing you happy birthday.
That's pretty cool.
And he survived the shooting in the Pittsburgh synagogue, too.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine going through all that and then also having to put up with that shooting? It's a real unbelievable experience.
Here's how I think, Anthony, the rest of America looks at the border wall issue, is that there clearly is a huge problem at the border. Big problem. It has to be addressed, and it's not just this administration that's talked about it, but previous administrations and people down there on the border. However, we still need to be able to cross back and forth. There's a lot of commerce that goes on back and forth between the between the two nations and people who live on both sides. But it does seem to be on one side you have Nancy Pelosi saying not a nickel for the wall because her belief is that this is a campaign promise, not as much a strategic way to fix the problem at the border. However, on the other side, you can really see where there are parts where a wall is important and it needs to be constructed. So what's the solution? how can we actually not look towards the interests of Democrats or Republicans or the president, but look towards the interests of America? How do we come to a resolution?
I think there's a way to make all sides happy, and I say that with caution because sometimes nothing makes both sides happy. Maybe that's a good thing if we can both come out of this with feeling like we got something or didn't get something. Who knows? To me, the solution is very simple. You put money towards physical barriers along the southern border. I said I will support that. I have voted for that to help fund construction of new physical barriers in the areas the Border Patrol and the experts tell us that makes sense. That alone, as any expert will tell you, is not enough to strengthen our borders. That's a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we have to have more technology. You have 1 in 5 trucks that cross over the Mexican border that do not get inspected by these X-ray machines. So many of those trucks are going through not being inspected. So we have to invest in technology. We have to do that also at our other entries, like our ports, where a lot of drugs come into through boats. So we can invest there. And then if there's other, my preference would be let's take some of these other issues that have been hanging out there for the last couple of years, like DACA, and if we can maybe throw that in there, let's move forward. So put money towards physical barriers, put money towards technology, strengthen our borders, and then let's solve some of these long-standing problems like DACA. And I think most Americans would be supportive of that. And Coulter's not supportive of that. Maybe people on the far left won't be supportive of that because they view it as giving in. But that's too bad. We got to move past this issue, and we have other challenges that are facing this country, like infrastructure, like drug costs, like health care. And the longer we fight over this issue and potentially go into another government shutdown, which is really wrong, we're not going to solve some of those other big problems. So let's put money towards physical barriers. Let's do other investments. And let's try and fix some of these other immigration issues that have been hanging out there for the last couple of years.
Andrew.
And I don't know if I had heard it at the top of the hour news or whatnot, but there was going to be border agents or border officials that were going to meet with this committee of Congress people that are trying to work together, not having the president or Pelosi involved. Why is it now that they're finally going in front of everybody and telling them what they need? A lot of people on both sides say, well, we'll hear from the experts what they want. What's taking so long, and why isn't that just happening?
Well, I know that many members of Congress have sat down and talked to some of the experts. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to go to the White House a few weeks ago, and I did go, so I could hear directly from the Director of Homeland Security and other folks in the administration about their desire for physical barriers along the border. The conference committee, I believe, just took a trip down to the border, both the Democrats and Republicans, to talk to some of the border agents. I think that's a good thing. I hope that they can come back with some kind of a compromise that's going to be acceptable to all sides. But the issue is very clear to me, and I think we can move past this. But as long as both of the extremes are saying we will not give in, if you do anything on DACA, you'll have an Ann Coulter say that's too far. If the left says no money whatsoever for physical barriers, that's going to be too far. That's what's going to drive this conversation off the cliff. But if we can get back to the middle and say, yes, let's allocate money towards physical barriers. Yes, let's try and solve something like DACA. Yes, let's invest in technology. I believe that most Americans will support that, and then we need to move on to some of these other issues.
Chuck Lester is on the village board in the village of Ilion. You mentioned Ilion Water, and he's on the line right now to make a comment. Chuck, you're on with Congressman Anthony Brindisi.
Well, I'd just like to thank Anthony for mentioning us, and I'm really glad we're on the radar with him. Infrastructure is probably one of the worst in the country, and I'm really ready, willing, and able to work with his office or any other office, the federal, state, local government that can help us get this stuff straightened out.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Chuck. And I talked to the mayor last week when the issues were happening at their height, the water main breaks. I told him, and I've spoken to him a couple times since the election, and said I will do whatever I can within my power to help the village and other communities who are suffering with this issue of poor water quality and old infrastructure, because we have to. And I know there's going to be some meetings. I was glad to see the state get more engaged and the governor get more engaged in this issue. because we can use resources at that level as well. And I think if we all work together, we can help try and alleviate some of these problems. At the very basic core of our country, people should be able to enjoy good, clean drinking water. And because of our old infrastructure in this country, many communities, like the village of Ilion, are suffering right now because the pipes are just too old. And we have to make investments at the federal level, the state level, to try and help local communities like Ilion cope with this problem.
All right, Chuck, thanks for the call, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Anthony.
Mm-hmm. Chuck Lester in the village of Ilion. One more I want to throw at you here. The spokesman Michael McAdams with the National Republican Congressional Committee saying, how much longer will Anthony Brindisi remain silent about Nancy Pelosi's appointment of, I don't know if I say her name properly, Ilhan Omar to the House Foreign Affairs Committee? This is dangerous. She's a Minnesota representative who I'm assuming must be Muslim. Do you have any knowledge of this, and what's your response?
I know that members have been appointed to various committees, specifically with regards to this member. I have many disagreements with her, particularly as it relates to Israel and the what I think is the very anti-Semitic BDS movement. And that is something I know she has been supportive of. I condemn that. I have voted as a member of the state assembly several times to condemn the anti-BDS, the BDS movement. I think it's something that is wrong and is anti-Semitic, and I would not want to see our government take any type of position that would be contrary to our allies in the state of Israel. They're one of our closest allies, and there's a movement out there across the world to try and boycott products from Israel, and I believe that's it's a very anti-Semitic move on parts of many private organizations, many backed by some states governments, and it's wrong.
At one point, she blamed a lot of things that have happened, terrorism, on the affairs of the United States. So the way that we've reacted, the way we've acted in foreign affairs is the result of that is the terrorism that we see around the nation. A lot of people condemned that, but clearly Nancy Pelosi has appointed her to the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And
look, I think blaming our country is ridiculous. We are the greatest country in the world. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Have we made mistakes in foreign affairs? I think everyone would agree that we've made mistakes over the course of our history in foreign affairs. Do those mistakes then prompt people to go out and commit awful terrorist acts? I don't think so. I think that there are people with a lot of hate in their heart and want to do great harm to our country, and we have every right to defend ourselves and to try and root out terrorism wherever it is. That's my belief, and it's unfortunate that others would like to blame our country when we should be working together to try and root out terrorism all across the globe.
Congressman Anthony Brindisi, we thank you for the time and the reaction to last night. It was quite an interesting night.
You got it. Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Anthony Brindisi.